There's a lot going on at City Hall, and we want to bring in our political reporter to talk about it. So, Paris, thank you. We know that you're busy. There are three main things that I want to talk about. Let's start with the budget. We saw the mayor come back in front of everyone this morning with a press conference, kind of doubling down on the corporate head tax.
Yeah, but basically saying he's going to compromise now and make it apply to bigger companies. So those with 500 employees or more, and then he would charge them $33 per head instead of 21, which I believe was the initial proposal for companies with 100 or more. So that's a compromise aimed at saying, look, we don't want to hit the small businesses, so we're just going to make sure it's the really big corporations that can afford this. And that could get him a few more votes for his budget. You know, right now they're in a standoff and he doesn't have the 25 votes that he would need. But we spoke just a second ago with Alderman Hopkins, who said he's really about 4 or 5 votes short of that. So, you know, the log rolling and the arm twisting over the next few days could produce those extra votes and avoid a city government shutdown.
We certainly don't want to see a citywide government shutdown, but we'll look to see more on that. Also, the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, now threatening to pull funds from the CTA. Talk a little bit more about what's going on there.
Well, the Federal Transportation Administration basically said that they're going to pull funds unless something isn't done about crime on the CTA, unless there aren't more uniformed officers and resources going to bring down crime on the CTA. The mayor's response to that is to sort of consult the legal department in the city to say, can the federal government legally do that? If this is money earmarked already federally for the CTA, you know, there have been court cases in the past that have basically ruled that the federal government cannot just withhold funds for reasons like this. So that's what the mayor's office is attempting to do right now. But, you know, they also brought up the point that the mass transit bill that just passed in Springfield basically calls for more uniformed officers and more safety measures to be taken on the CTA. So it calls for a lot of the things that the Transportation Administration is talking about.
And this wouldn't be the first time that the federal government has looked specifically at Illinois and Chicago to say we're going to pull funds if.
Yeah, they did it. Well, they did in the first Trump administration and the second Trump administration in terms of pulling public safety grants because of the city's sanctuary status. And courts ruled over and over that that's not a legal mechanism by the federal government to do that. Just because they don't like, you know, an ordinance that's on the book, they can't pull federal funding that's already been allocated and voted on by Congress. So it would appear that this is kind of similar to that, which is why the mayor is saying today we're just going to, you know, we're considering our options here with the law department. But again, you know, proponents of this transit bill, this $1.5 billion bill, will say like that is one of the points of this bill is to amp up public safety, you know, on these trains, more cameras, more ambassadors, more uniformed officers to make sure things like that Luke burning incident don't happen again.
Mm-hmm. And that is really what they addressed in their letter, specifically talking about the young woman who was on the train, who had gasoline thrown on her and who was lit on fire. But there are bigger issues there in terms, like you said, of the funding and where that would come from to get more cameras or to get more police officers actually on these trains when you already have an issue with how many police officers or vacancies there are right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a separate detail called the transit police, which that might be what this state budget calls for. I mean, it calls for more resources and money to be spent on this kind of thing. So it could be a separate pot of money than the police, and it could be specifically transit police that are under the purview of the transit authority. I mean, you'll see, you know, cars go around the city that say transit detail, and so that's a separate agency. Metra has its own police detail. So my guess is it would come out of that, not necessarily the general police force.
Okay, and then on a final note here, I want to talk to you about the SNAP curfew. I know that was the topic of discussion for you and Alderman Hopkins. Tell us some of the things that you all went over.
Well, Alderman Hopkins just today has introduced and finalized a new ordinance he's calling the time and place curfew. And he says this is not a snap curfew, but it works similarly in that it would give police the ability to declare roving curfews, depending on teen gatherings getting out of hand. But it would mandate that the police decide on this with 12 hours advance notice. The snap curfew law gave a half an hour advance notice. So Hopkins said he went back and revised it. He saw the opposition and he said, okay, well, we'll do it so that there's 12 hours advance notice. And a lot of times he says the police know within 12 hours that some big event might attract a crowd of teens. And so it'll give the police the option to declare a curfew, but they would have to give the 12-hour notice here. And he is introducing that today.
And some people would look at it and say, why are we talking about this in the winter months? I think there are a couple of things that maybe he would point to, and the first would be what happened after the Christmas tree lighting.
Yeah.
But then also the fact that it seems like we do keep having this discussion right as the summer begins, which is almost too late for anything to really happen.
You're right. You bring up a great point. I mean, by the time these discussions happen in the summer, things are well in motion and everyone's outside. And, you're also right about the fact that the Christmas tree lighting was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of why Hopkins decided to go back and reintroduce this snap curfew, or this time and place curfew. That was alarming. The fact that there were so many people downtown and that people knew, he said officers had ample notice that this could happen. And so, he says if this law was on the books, they could have stopped it. They would have given the 12-hour notice and they would have instituted that roving curfew.
Yeah. Did you talk to him, though, I mean, whether it's snap curfew, time and place curfew, about the pushback from this, people who will say there is a curfew on the books anyhow, and even the Christmas tree lighting situation would have been after the hours of that curfew if it was actually enforced?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of alders have brought up the point that the police have the tools right now to break up these gatherings. Although I think the difference is that sometimes without this curfew tool, it could be dangerous for the police to try and go up and break something up that it starts to maybe get violent, as opposed to doing something proactively, giving the 12 hours notice and saying, all right, there's going to be a curfew starting at 8, on State Street for kids under 18 if they're unaccompanied. And that just gives them the point. Alderman Hopkins says is to dissuade the gathering from happening to begin with, because now the word will go out that there's a curfew now and you could get arrested if you're unaccompanied and you're in the Loop or you're on State Street or on Millennium Park at this hour, and it would last for 4 hours maximum. So he's hoping that it acts as a deterrent, as opposed to like having the police have to go up and go in and break up a group, because it could be dangerous. If there's 100 teenagers, you don't know who's armed. It could be mob action, and it could be dangerous for the police. And this is more of a preventative measure.
Yeah, and so much conversation about the police, law enforcement in general, because we were speaking about other aspects of law enforcement when it comes to even the CTA. But from this standpoint, CPD. But I remember when Alderman Hopkins was bringing up the snap curfew over the past summer, there was this question as to what is the opinion of CPD in all of this? Are they backing it or are they not?
It's confusing because he says that he's talked to Police Superintendent Snelling, who said he would support this and he would use it responsibly if it was instituted. But then Snelling kind of issued a public statement backtracking that a bit. My guess is because, the superintendent and the mayor do not want to be seen as being apart, on an issue of public safety. The superintendent's role is to support the mayor, to support the agenda. And so Hopkins says, no, he's talked to me, says he likes this idea and he would use it and it would help him. But then he went out and said, no, I'm not wading into this whole debate. This is for the policymakers. But you'd have to, we talked to Eddie Johnson and Gary McCarthy about this kind of thing, who have supported this, and say, yeah, this is another tool. We would certainly welcome it if we had this tool available to us. So you'd have to think that the consensus in law enforcement is this is a good idea. from their perspective. But, the mayor has a different kind of perspective on this. And he has from the beginning that, more policing or harsher policing or penalizing kids for going out and running around in the city isn't going to solve the problem, when the problem is, kids that don't have other things to do, kids that don't have good mentorship or good resources. And that has always been the mayor's approach. He's been consistent on that. So that's where the divide comes down.
Yeah, and then he has to also look at the issue of lawsuits to the city as well, and how much that could end up costing.
Right, and I mean, groups like the ACLU and this Northwestern professor Sheila Beatty have talked about, well, we're going to sue. This is violates First Amendment rights of speech and of assembly, and that's where Hopkins said, and he went back and he said, well, that's why I'm going to do this on a 12-hour warning basis. Instead of a half an hour, we're going to give you 12 hours. And that should be ample time to warn somebody, to say, like, this isn't just arbitrarily taking away your First Amendment rights.
Yeah. Okay, let's go over some time frames on these things. So Alderman Hopkins is going to be introducing that when, and when do things move? What's the timeline there?
Well, he just went public with us today, an exclusive with us. So he'll probably introduce it at the next city council meeting, which then means it's got to go through the whole process of going into committee and having hearings, being voted out of committee. And, it would be an uphill climb, he acknowledges, because the mayor did oppose the snap curfew. But he's hoping that with the budget, the mayor occupied with the budget, maybe he could sneak this through right now and get some more alders on board.
Yeah, and then for CTA, it looks like some of the deadlines for the FTA start next week for them to get things to them.
Yeah, and so I would look to see if the city's going to sue to stop, or to put a injunction on any withholding of federal money, like they've done in these other cases and done so successfully. Say, like, look, A, we are working on the public safety aspect of it. We have this new state bill that's going to give us resources, but B, you can't just withhold federal money for a reason like this. And the FDA might say, well, but you're violating your duty to safely operate transit, and so we can. And so that's something that will probably be hashed out in court, unless the mayor picks up the phone and cuts some sort of deal, with the FTA.
Yeah, wouldn't that be surprising? And of course, the budget has to be approved by the end of the month. Okay,
yep.
Paris, thank you so much. We'll be watching you later on this evening. What time do we need to tune in?
10 p.m. Chicago Report. We're going to delve into all this. And I should mention, if they don't pass a budget at the end of the month, that's where we see a city shutdown. It's never happened before. It's unprecedented, and so unprecedented that city leaders don't even know what would happen. Can they pass, temporary spending bills? Will the government shut down? Will workers still get paid? All an open question right now.
Yeah, history that we don't want to make. Thank you,
right.
Paris. We'll be watching tonight.